course I'm going to offer a webinar replay. No big deal, right? Right? What's up, guys? Jason here, and welcome to episode 17 of Building an Online Business from Scratch, where I'm walking you through A to Z, everything I'm doing to put together a webinar sales funnel to sell coaching and consulting on the back end. In today's episode, we are going to talk about the pros and cons of doing a webinar replay. And then at the end, I'll give you my verdict on whether or not I think you should be using a webinar replay in your own business. So let's just start with what the heck is a webinar replay? Simply, it's offering the webinar anytime after the scheduled webinar time. So that's going to be our definition moving forward. So whenever someone signs up for the webinar, whether they do or don't show up, if you allow them to see it again outside of a scheduled time, meaning on their own time, like a VSL, a video sales letter, then that will be considered a replay. If you tell them, hey, you missed it, you can go sign up for another webinar, that's not really a replay. That's just another webinar. So now that we got that out of the way, let's look at the pros. What are the pros of allowing people to see the webinar pretty much on demand? Because that's what a replay is. And of course, it can be timed. Maybe it's only on demand for a few days, or if it's on demand infinitely. So what are the pros here? Well, according to the research I've done, experts say that in their businesses, upwards of 50% of their sales come from these replays. And that's a pretty powerful statement. Now, I have yet to launch the webinar I'm working on, so I can't tell you from personal experience, and I'll get to why I actually never will be able to tell you from personal experience in a little bit here. But they say that a lot of their sales come from the webinar replays. So the pro of this really is you get to pick up sales from people who, didn't show up, didn't finish, or we're kind of, I don't really know, and then you can kind of catch them later, and maybe they wanted to go back and see a particular part of the webinar to convince them that you were worth their time and resources, resources being money, obviously, because you're asking them to purchase something from you. And people who didn't finish the webinar can actually go through and see the pitch. And that's kind of the biggest thing, is you have another opportunity to pitch them again. So your webinar replay page can have just the webinar and it play, or more commonly, it will have the webinar and then it will have a full-on sales letter below it, because the people who didn't purchase on your webinar, they're not as eager to whip out that credit card and hand you that number. So we've got to do a little more work and education before they can make the informed decision to say, yes, this guy really is worth my time, or yes, this gal really is worth my time, so I should purchase from him or her. So that's essentially the big pro. Is it's common industry belief that 50% of your sales will come from this, and it's a way to follow up, which of course following up is important, and so it's one way to follow up. Now I'm going to get into the cons, and the cons are going to be a little longer, and just disclaimer, you can tell that I'm a little biased because I have more cons than pros, right? But anyway, so this is just my humble opinion. The problem with offering a replay is there's less incentive to show up to the actual webinar itself. And this is regardless of whether or not you tell people there's going to be a replay. Because when you're not going to do a replay, one of the great things I think in delivering webinars is the ability in your email follow-up pre-webinar is to be able to say, there's not going to be a replay, so you better show up. There's not going to be a replay, so you better show up. There's not going to be a replay, so you better show up. That's a really powerful scarcity building tool, because it's telling them you're only going to get this webinar in this one period of time. I am not going to say, yeah, you could show up at 7 o'clock tonight, or you could just wait until the webinar is over, and then I'm going to send you a link to the replay, and you can just watch it on your leisure. Like, there's not as much incentive to really block out that period of time and say, okay, I'm going to show up. And this is when they say, okay, I'm going to show up, that's the prospect talking, right? Because if they know there's going to be a replay, well, then even if they do show up, they might be watching and go, oh, well, CSI is on, or something more interesting is on the TV, so I'm just gonna pause this, and there's gonna be a replay, so I'll go watch it, right? They're never gonna come back and watch it, right? They're gonna find so many other things that are infinitely more entertaining than watching a webinar on whatever your topic is, unless you've animated the webinar or you've done like a full-on production documentary style. Well, even then, I think it's hard to compete with, if they have the option of watching one of the latest Marvel movies on HBO or watching your webinar, the Marvel movie is probably going to win. I mean, I don't know your audience, but I'm just guessing whatever blockbuster's on TV is probably going to beat the webinar. And if they know that they can go to the replay, they're going to opt for the entertainment. So that's a lengthy, seems a bit of a rabbit hole and science tangent, but that's how we need to think when we're offering that replay, because we're giving them permission to say, I can watch it later. And what we want to say is, no, you got to watch it right now. And so that's a huge con when it comes to offering a replay, is you don't have that power to say, no, you have to watch it today, now. Now, the second con is when you offer replays, and this depends on whether or not you're doing automated, live, or hybrid webinars. I did a previous episode on that. I think it was episode 15. You can go back and watch that later. But it gives the sense of automation, and it can diminish the value, perceived value of the webinar you're giving right now, because they will think, well, if they're offering a replay, then this whole thing might be recorded and it might not be real. Now, if you're doing automated webinars, well, that will be true. But if you're doing a live webinar, you run the risk of having the perception that they might not believe you, that it's actually live, if you're just going to offer a replay of it. So either way, I think even if you're going to offer a replay, you shouldn't tell people that there's going to be a replay until they do or don't show up, until the actual webinar time. And the final con is the precedent that it sets. Because when you offer a replay, the next time you try to do a webinar, they're going to assume they being your prospects, your list, your audience, your wherever these people are coming from, whoever's interacted with you in the past, which is your warm audience, your best audience, is going to remember, last time Jason offered a replay of it, even though he didn't really say that he was going to. So I'm not going to show up to the webinar. Or worse, Jason said there wasn't going to be a webinar replay last time, but I got stuck in traffic and I missed the webinar, and then I got a link to a webinar replay anyway. So he's probably just going to pull the same thing anyway. So I don't actually ever need to show up to a webinar. So the two ways that can go. Now, obviously, if you say there's no replays, then you best not do a replay. Just please don't do it. If you want to do a replay, just don't include that there's not going to be a replay in your pre-webinar emails and incubation process to get people to show up. So as you can probably tell, my verdict is that we shouldn't do replays. And I think there's two different solutions here. And I'll go through each of them depending on the time and energy that you have and the bandwidth that you have, because sure, I've come up with a couple of, actually it's not two, it's three. There's three different things you can do here. And it just depends on the bandwidth and the software that you're working with and how much time you have, all right? Because we got to remember, we don't have an unlimited amount of time here. We need to be cognizant of the time we're spending putting together these systems, because we need to get them out there as fast as humanly possible so we can begin testing and actually learning from our customers, so we can actually start getting some income and growing our business, as opposed to doing all of these things before the webinar launches, trying to make it all perfect and then launch and find out we have to change half of the things we did. So anyway, number one, what we can do is we can only offer replays to people who showed up to the webinar. So if someone shows up and they don't finish for whatever reason, or they don't buy for whatever reason, we can offer them a webinar replay saying, hey, I noticed you were on the webinar and you chose not to, do XYZ. So I thought it'd be really helpful if I made the replay of the webinar available for the next few days, so you can go through it and make sure you fill in all your notes or whatever it may be. I've seen some people who do, hey, there were some technical difficulties. Some people got cut off during the webinar, so I just sent it to everyone. That might work for another like 6 or 7 months, and then people are going to catch on that it's an automated email that you're just doing anyway. So I would say don't go the route of pretending like there was some technical difficulty on the webinar and that's why you're offering a replay. I think providing a real legitimate reason for the replay, knowing that your viewers know that this email is going out automatically. They know that you're not sitting there at 12:30 at night typing out an email feverishly saying, "Oh my gosh, half people were lost on the webinar, so I made this really nice looking web page for you." And they're going to know too, right? Because you click on some of those, you go to the web page and you're like, okay, I know you didn't write this super long sales letter that's underneath this webinar replay for, in the last 6 hours. So just and now if there was a technical difficulty, then that's okay. You can be honest and legit, and people are going to thank you for being authentic. But if it's an automated thing, don't pretend like it was a last minute thing that you threw the webinar together for. So that's number one. Replays only for people who showed up and give a legitimate reason for why you're providing it to them. And then if you can, and this is again, how much a budget do you have for these nice pieces of software? If you can, figure out how to limit the links or have expiring links in your emails so that they can't go back and watch the webinar like 2 or 3 months later. Have like a 3 or 4 day period max that they can go back and watch it. So that's number one. Number two is you can take something away from the replay. And this is something I think is really nice if you're just getting started and you don't really have time for what I'm about to talk about, which is the ideal. And that is you can on the webinar say, this particular bonus or this particular part of the product is only available to, or this particular price point is only available to people who sign up right now. And then make that price point, that bonus, or that piece of the product only available to the people who buy on that webinar. And then when you give the replay to the people who showed up to your webinar, again, only people who show up to the webinar. If they didn't show up to the webinar, just redirect them to the landing page saying, I have another showing. You can go to that one. Don't give them a replay if they didn't actually bother to show up. So those people who showed up to the webinar, well, then they didn't buy, and you said on the webinar, this is only available right now for the next hour or 2 hours or until this webinar is over. And then after that, this special deal, offer, or price is going away. And then when prospects go to your list goes to that webinar replay page, and obviously this email sequence will only be to people who didn't purchase on your webinar. They rewatch the webinar, and with something like Camtasia or ScreenFlow, or I think even Windows Movie Maker could probably do this for you. It's some basic software. You cut out the part of your webinar where you say, only live attendees are going to get, X, Y, Z, or this special price is for live attendees. So for example, if you have a $100 product and you're going to sell it for $47 on the live webinar, well, your replay version should have that price point at $100 because you're rewarding people for showing up. So that's pretty key. Or what I'm doing in my instance is and I'm going to be split testing several different things. So I've got multiple versions of my webinar. But one of the things I'm doing is on the live webinar, I'm offering a coaching aspect to it, a live mastermind Q&A. That part is going to be cut out of the replay that I'm going to be split testing against a different post-webinar funnel process that I'm about to get to in a second. And that's because whatever I do, I want people to show up to the webinar because I'm showing up to the webinar. I'm doing hybrid webinars, so if I'm showing up, I want you to show up. And that's just, it's a great way to offer webinars, but reward people for actually showing up. And yeah, you might get a couple of emails of people saying, hey, this was, I was on the webinar and you offered this, and then now I'm on the replay page and it's not here. And you can legitimately say, well, I did say it's only for people on the live webinar. So you're holding true to your word. Now, finally, I want to get into the last one, which is my personal favorite. And this is just straight up having a post-webinar launch, almost like a launch funnel. And one particular person in my space, he has, not in my space, the platform, my industry or niche. He has 20 to 40 minutes. I think one is 20, two 20s and one 40. So he's got two 20-minute videos and one 40-minute video. Jeff Walker product launch style post webinar that is just handling objections and educating. And it goes out to, because I opted in with different emails to figure out what these people do with, depending on whether you do or don't show up, which is something you definitely want to do when you're testing other people's webinar sales funnels. To the people who show up to his webinar, he sends them a series of these 3 different value videos. And it's essentially, it takes out the rapport part. It's like a bunch of mini webinars where he's teaching and he's handling all of the objections that people might have from buying. And below that, he has a very well-written, well-crafted sales page. And I mean, it takes the same content, the same benefits from the webinar, but it just puts it in text form. And he has a great video up top that's just giving more value to the viewer and explaining away the objections that viewers might have had from not purchasing on the webinar. And of course, there's several buy links on that page, and then you can go and purchase the product. So to summarize what we talked about in this episode, there's pros and cons to offering a replay, and really it comes down to brand perception. Do you want people to expect webinar replays from you? That is the question you want to answer. If the answer is yes, or I don't care, then go ahead and offer all the replays you want. If, however, you want to think a little long term and think about how people are going to interact with your webinars in the future, then you probably don't want to do a replay. Definitely not a replay to people who didn't actually show up to the webinar. Of course, people who showed up to the webinar, you can offer a replay that takes away something special that was offered on the live webinar, or you can go the savvy route and completely do away with the replay and just have 3 or 4 value-driven videos on top of a full-on sales letter that goes out to people who went to your webinar and didn't buy. So thank you for watching. I hope you found this informative and actionable. If you got some value out of this video, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you're on YouTube, subscribe for more business building and marketing tactics and strategies just like the ones we talked about in this video. Again, I'm going from A to Z, building an online business and consulting practice completely from scratch, live for all of you guys and gals to see, holding nothing back, showing the successes and the failures. So I'm really excited to have you along with me on this journey. Go ahead and drop a comment below if you got some value out of this. And if you have any questions about webinars and whether or not you should do a webinar replay for your particular situation, I'd love to hear what you're thinking and help you out in your webinar sales funnel as well. So until next week, keep building the business you love, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.